Jeff, good to see you this morning. What's your read on this this kind of campaign? I guess at first tentative and then much more, I guess, firm by many CEOs to press for the formal transfer of power, the transition process to get underway. Is it just about honoring norms, or do they have an eagerness to operate under a Biden administration right now?
Well, that's a great question. We've got about an hour and a half or so, right, to respond to that, because I could keep you here till lunch.
Yeah.
So, on that one. Good morning, Mike. I think that the business community, major business leaders, the larger ones, have never been all that comfortable with President Trump. While perhaps 2/3 of them Republican, the surveys continually showed back in 2016, most didn't support him. However, when he got elected, they were enthusiastic. They thought there'd be regulatory rollbacks and some of the perhaps tax relief that, in fact, they got on both those fronts, and they were happy there. But the disruption they didn't like, the one-offs, is that part of President Trump's modus operandi has always been starting these fights, so playing one off against the other, Ford versus GM, Pfizer versus Merck, and Lockheed versus Boeing. They hate that stuff, and they're happy for that to come to an end. The disruption in global markets with some of the ad hoc trade policies that were so divisive. There are some that they like, by the way. But still, those are some of the reasons where they're hopeful for a change. A lot of the international agreements on that they want to get back into on climate change, perhaps, and some others. However, there is a desire for stability. They don't like the uncertainty. They don't like divided communities, angry workforces, and the rest. And to have some degree of continuity that way, they're excited about that. So they're a specific business agenda. But I think a lot of their enthusiasm is not parochial self-interest, but patriotism. They just like this transition, regardless of who they supported. They'd like this transition to be a smooth one.
What do you make, Jeff, just to focus in maybe on one example of this, CEOs and companies falling in line behind the Trump administration, but then pulling back? This announcement by GM that they're no longer going to back the Trump administration's lawsuit against California emissions standards. It just came out yesterday. What does that say about, Mary Barra kind of going back and forth on that?
That's a pretty sophisticated question. I don't think I know a lot of viewers would have been tracking as carefully what's been happening there. Just for a second or two of background, that's an example of the auto industry that was split. Ford and BMW and some other big automakers went and working with California. They had an exemption of the Clean Air Act to try to make more efficient cars. GM didn't buy into that, and Toyota was being pressured by the administration, in fact, to fight California's exemption for more exalted, for higher level standards to meet. But half the industry went one way, half went the other. The Trump administration sued the part of the industry that wanted to work with California, saying, we're on track. We think we can make a much more efficient car of 55 miles a gallon in the next 5 years. And Mary Barra and GM have changed their position on that. It's a good example. This Build Back Better, that sometimes the green solution is the most efficient solution. That's where Mary Barra is. And it's been tough for GM. She's never publicly challenged President Trump. And yet, I don't know what's going on there. She so frequently has become a scapegoat, whether or not on trade issues or having to do with the manufacturer. Incredibly heroic story, what Mary Barra and her colleagues at GM did with the manufacture of PPE and ventilators on very short notice. And yet, somehow they've come under a firing line when she's a very non-political person. But I think she's a great example of that auto industry coming together the way others were fractured through this period, and with this Build Back Better theme.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.